6 months later, Commander Jake Harrison stood on the observation deck of Peace Station Alpha, the first joint construction project of the new Tri-Species Alliance. Through the massive windows, he could see something that would have been impossible to imagine when the human fleet first arrived in the Warzone. Corvin crystal ships worked alongside Zephyrian energy vessels, their crews sharing tools and techniques. Human coordination ships moved between them like helpful friends, carrying supplies and messages. The space that had once been filled with laser fire and explosions now hummed with the sounds of construction and cooperation. "Sir, Lieutenant," Amy Foster called from her new position as the station's chief science officer. "We're getting the daily progress report from the construction teams." Jake smiled. Amy had volunteered to stay and help coordinate the massive project of turning a war zone into a center of peace. Most of his original crew had made the same choice. "What's the word?" Jake asked. "The Corvin defensive shield generators are working perfectly with the Zephyrian power systems," Amy reported. "And the human administrative systems are keeping everyone organized and on schedule. We'll have the first phase complete ahead of time." Jake nodded with satisfaction. The plan was working better than anyone had dared to hope. Captain Mary Johnson approached from the other side of the observation deck. She now served as the station's diplomatic coordinator, helping solve the small conflicts that came up when 3 different species tried to work together. "Jake," she said with a grin, "you need to see this." She led him to another window where they could see the main construction area. Below them, a mixed crew of Corvins, Zephyrians, and humans were installing a new communications array. But what made Jake smile was how they were working together. A Corvin engineer was explaining something to a Zephyrian technician, both of them floating in spacesuits. The Zephyrian's energy form glowed through its specially designed suit, while the Corvin's crystal body sparkled in the starlight. Between them, a human translator was helping them understand each other's technical terms. 3 months ago, those 2 species had never had a conversation that didn't involve weapons, Mary observed. Now they're teaching each other engineering, techniques. Dr. Karen Bell joined them at the window. She had been promoted to head of interspecies psychology for the Alliance, studying how the 3 races could work together most effectively. "The progress has been remarkable," she said. "Both species are discovering that their former enemies have knowledge and skills they need. The Corvins are fascinated by Zephyrian energy manipulation. The Zephyrians are amazed by Corvin crystal technology." "And humans?" Jake asked. Karen laughed. "We're the glue that holds everything together. We're good at organizing things, solving problems, and helping people communicate. It turns out those are exactly the skills needed to make peace work." Lieutenant Colonel Steve Parker walked up to join the group. He now commanded the Alliance Security Force, a mixed unit of volunteers from all 3 species whose job was to protect the growing peace. "Jake," he said, "we just got word from Earth Command. They want to know how a simple exploration mission ended up creating the first galactic alliance in known history." Jake thought about that for a moment. When the human fleet had first jumped into the war zone, they had been looking for new worlds to explore and catalog. Instead, they had found something much more important. "Tell them," Jake said finally, "that we did what humans do best. We found people who needed help, and we helped them." Captain Lisa Murphy's voice came over the station's communication system. She was now in charge of the Alliance fleet, commanding ships from all 3 species working together. "Commander Harrison to the main briefing room, please. We have visitors." Jake made his way through the station's corridors, passing mixed crews from all 3 species. The hallways were designed to accommodate everyone with special lighting, for the Zephyrians and mineral supplements in the air for the Corvins. Human-designed signs and directions kept everyone from getting lost. In the briefing room, he found an amazing sight. Kreshva and Luminous Echo sat at the same table, no longer as enemies forced together, but as partners planning their next project. Between them sat several human officers, helping coordinate what looked like a major new initiative. "Jake," Kreshva said, its crystal voice now warm with friendship. "We have a proposal for you." Luminous Echo's energy form pulsed with excitement. "We want to expand the alliance. There are other conflicts in the galaxy, other wars that have gone on too long. We want to do what you did for us." Jake felt his heart race with excitement. "You want to become peacekeepers?" "Together," Kreshva confirmed. "Corvin's strength, Zephyrian speed, and human wisdom. We believe we can bring peace to conflicts across the galaxy. We have already identified 12 ongoing wars that could benefit from our intervention," Luminous Echo added. "Wars where both sides have forgotten why they started fighting, just as we had." Jake looked around the room at his friends and allies. Human officers who had chosen to stay and build something new, alien leaders who had transformed from enemies into partners. This was bigger than anyone had imagined. "What do you need from me?" Jake asked. "Leadership," both alien leaders said at the same time, then looked at each other in surprise. Kreshva explained. "Humans have something neither of our species possessed. You have the ability to see beyond the immediate conflict to the solution that benefits everyone. You make enemies into friends. More importantly," Luminous Echo added, "other species will trust you in ways they might not trust us. You are new to the galaxy. You have no old enemies, no ancient grudges. You can be neutral mediators." Jake felt the weight of what they were asking. They wanted humanity to help bring peace to the entire galaxy. It was an enormous responsibility, but also an incredible opportunity. He thought about Earth's history, about all the wars that had ended in peace, all the enemies who had become allies. His species had learned, sometimes the hard way, that fighting forever was a choice, and it was a choice that could be changed. "Yes," Jake said finally. "Let's do it. Let's bring peace to the galaxy." Outside the station, the former war zone continued its transformation. Ships that had once carried weapons now carried construction materials. Space that had echoed with battle cries now rang with laughter and cooperation. The silence that had fallen when the human fleet arrived had been replaced by something far better, the sound of hope. 3 hours later, something happened that nobody had seen in 300 years. A Corvin transport ship and a Zephyrian light vessel approached the human flagship at the same time, carrying the leaders of both ancient fleets. Jake Harrison stood in the docking bay of the UES Defiant, watching as two enemies prepared to meet face to face. His hands were sweating, but he tried to look calm. Chief Diplomat Susan Carter stood beside him, along with Dr. Karen Bell and Lieutenant Colonel Steve Parker. "Remember," Susan whispered, "no weapons, no ceremonial displays of power, no military honors. We're treating them both as equal guests, nothing more." The Corvin Hive commander came through the airlock first. Jake had seen pictures, but meeting the being in person was different. It stood 8 feet tall and looked like a person carved from blue crystal. Light moved through its body like blood through veins, and its eyes glowed with intelligent fire. When it walked, its feet made soft, ringing sounds on the metal floor. "I am Kreshva, voice of the Corvin Collective," it said. Its voice came from vibrations in its crystal body, translated by the human computers into words they could understand. "Welcome aboard, Kreshva," Jake replied. "We're honored to have you here." The Zephyrian fleet singer arrived a moment later. Jake had to adjust his eyes to look at it properly. The being called Luminous Echo was made of pure white energy that constantly shifted and flowed. It had a roughly human shape, but its edges blurred into light. When it spoke, the air itself seemed to sing. "This is unprecedented," Luminous Echo said. "I have not been in the same space as a Corvin for centuries. Neither have I been near a Zephyrian without battle occurring," Kreshva replied. Jake noticed both beings were studying each other carefully. but not with hatred. They looked curious, like they were seeing each other clearly for the first time in generations. Susan Carter stepped forward. "If you'll both follow me, we've prepared a meeting room. It's designed to be comfortable for both your species." The room Susan had arranged was simple. A round table with comfortable chairs, some earth food and drinks, and windows showing the peaceful stars beyond. No flags, no weapons on the walls, no symbols of power, just a place where people could sit and talk. "Please, sit wherever you're comfortable," Susan said. Both alien leaders took seats across from each other. Jake and his team sat between them, not as judges or mediators, but as witnesses to what might be the most important conversation in galactic history. "I will be direct," Jake began. "We spent 3 days studying your conflict. We used our best, computers, and our smartest people to understand what you're fighting about." He activated a holographic display above the table. It showed a star map of the region where the war had started. "You're fighting over the Helix Nebula," Jake continued. "Both your species claimed it contained rare materials needed for your civilizations. The war began when both sides tried to mine it at the same time." Both alien leaders nodded. This much they remembered. "But here's what we discovered," Jake said, and the hologram changed to show recent sensor data. The Helix Nebula collapsed into a black hole 150 years ago. It doesn't exist anymore. The materials you were fighting over were sucked into the black hole decades before any of you were born. The silence that followed was deafening. Kreshva's crystal body flickered with different colors as the Corvin collective processed this. Information at light speed. Luminous Echo's energy form grew brighter and dimmer as waves of emotion passed through it. "Impossible," Kreshva said finally. "Our ancestors would have known." Dr. Bell leaned forward gently. "Your ancestors did know. We found records in the old battle reports. But by the time the nebula collapsed, the war had become about more than just the nebula. It had become about honor, revenge, and proving which species was stronger." Lieutenant Colonel Ben Harris, who had joined them from his ship, activated another display. "We found something else. The original border dispute that started the fighting. It was based on a translation error." The new hologram showed ancient documents comparing the original Corvin and Zephyrian territorial claims. The Corvin word Kethvan means "we request permission to mine here," Ben explained. But it was translated into Zephyrian as Kethvan, which means "this territory belongs to us forever." It was a mistake. Luminous Echo's form pulsed with what Jake thought might be shock. "You mean, we have been fighting for 3 centuries over a translation error and a nebula that no longer exists?" "Yes," Jake said simply. Kreshva stood up suddenly, its crystal body ringing like a bell. For a moment, Jake thought the Corvin leader might attack something, but instead, it just stood there, processing the magnitude of what it had learned. "Generations of warriors," Kreshva said quietly. "Billions of lives, entire worlds burned, for nothing." "Not for nothing," Susan Carter said carefully. "Both your civilizations are still here. You're both stronger, more advanced, and more resilient because of what you've been through. The question now is, what do you do with that strength?" Luminous Echo began to glow brighter. "Our songs tell of the great enemy, the crystal devourers, who would consume all energy in the galaxy. But looking at you now, Kreshva, I see no devourer. I see someone who looks as tired of this war as we are." Kreshva turned to look directly at the Zephyrian leader. Our collective memory speaks of the light-bringers who would blind all solid matter and turn the galaxy into chaos. But your light seems peaceful, sad even. Jake felt the moment building. These two beings were seeing each other as people for the first time in centuries. What if, he said carefully, instead of spending your energy fighting each other, you worked together? The Corvins have the best defensive technology in the galaxy. The Zephyrians have mastered energy manipulation like no one else. And humans, well, we're good at helping people figure out how to cooperate. Steve Parker smiled. We're also pretty good at paperwork and organizing things. Peace is complicated. It takes a lot of planning. Kreshva and Luminous Echo looked at each other, across the table. 300 years of hatred hung between them, but for the first time, Jake could see something else there, too. Hope. The space between the two alien fleets filled with humanity's history. Every human ship projected holographic displays that showed Earth's long journey from constant war to lasting peace. The images were beautiful and terrible at the same time. Dr. Karen Bell worked at her station on the UES Horizon, one of the human fleet's science vessels. She had studied alien minds for 15 years, and she believed she understood what was happening in the ships around them. Captain Johnson, she called to her ship's commander, the Corvins are analyzing our data at incredible speed. Their hive mind is processing centuries of human history in minutes. Captain Mary Johnson nodded. She was a calm woman who had led 3 successful first-contact missions with peaceful alien species. But this was different. This was trying to stop a war. What about the Zephyrians? Mary asked. They're more emotional, Karen replied. I'm detecting strong reactions to our music and art. I think they're feeling something they haven't felt in a long time. On the main display, the holographic images showed Earth's bloodiest conflicts, the World Wars, where millions died in trenches and bombers darkened the skies, the Cold War, where 2 superpowers almost destroyed the planet with nuclear weapons, civil wars, where brothers fought brothers. But then the images changed. They showed the peace treaties, the handshakes between former enemies, the Berlin Wall coming down, the United Nations building rising in New York, soldiers from different countries working together on peacekeeping missions. Lieutenant Danny Cooper, monitoring communications from his ship, the UES Venture, reported something strange. Sir, I'm picking up chatter from both fleets. They're talking to each other for the first time in years, but not to coordinate attacks. They're asking each other if they're seeing the same things we're showing them. Commander Jake Harrison, listening from the Defiant, felt a spark of hope. What are they saying exactly? The Corvins are asking if the images are real. They want to know if humans really did stop fighting each other. The Zephyrians are asking how it's possible for enemies to become friends. Jake smiled. Keep broadcasting. Show them everything. The human ships continued their peaceful invasion of the war zone. Instead of weapons, they used words. Instead of threats, they shared stories. The holographic displays now showed modern Earth, where former enemies worked together in space, shared technology, and helped each other during disasters. Lieutenant Colonel Ben Harris, the fleet's historian aboard the UES Explorer, had prepared something special. He transmitted the story of Christmas Day 1914, when British and German soldiers stopped fighting in World War I to sing carols together and play football in no man's land. Both fleets have stopped all combat preparations, reported Captain Lisa Murphy from her tactical station. Weapon systems are powering down. They're just watching us. The silence in space was complete now. No laser fire lit up the darkness. No explosions sent shockwaves through the void. For the first time in decades, this part of space was quiet except for the gentle hum of human ships, broadcasting messages of peace. Amy Foster picked up something interesting on her sensors. "Sir, I'm detecting movement in both fleets. Not attack. Movements, but ships repositioning to get better views of our displays," Steve Parker chuckled. "They're trying to get front-row seats to watch our history lesson." Jake realized this was the moment to take the next step. "Open direct communication channels. I want to talk to both fleet commanders personally." Danny's hands moved over his controls. "Channels open, sir. Both commanders are listening." Jake cleared his throat. "Hive commander of the Corvin fleet, fleet singer of the Zephyrian Armada. This is Commander Harrison. What you're seeing is real. Every image, every story, every peace treaty. This is what my species learned to do instead of fighting forever. The Ba'wi..." First response came from the Corvins. The mechanical voice of their hive commander seemed different now, less cold. "Human Jake Harrison, our collective mind has processed your data. The mathematical probability of natural enemies achieving permanent peace was calculated as nearly impossible. Yet your records show it happened repeatedly." "Because," Jake replied, "we learned that being enemies was a choice. And if it's a choice, it can be changed." The Zephyrian fleet singer's musical voice followed, but now it carried notes of something that might have been wonder. "Your species shows conflicts ending in cooperation rather than domination. This is unprecedented in our experience." Dr. Bell had an idea. She opened her own communication channel. "Fleet singer, hive commander, may I ask you both a question?" Both alien leaders gave permission. "When did you last have a conversation with each other that wasn't about battle tactics or surrender demands?" The silence that followed lasted several minutes. Jake could imagine both ancient leaders searching their memories, trying to remember a time when they simply talked. Finally, the Corvin hive commander responded. "Our collective memory contains no record of peaceful communication with Zephyrian entities. Nor do we recall speaking with Corvins except to issue challenges or threats," admitted the fleet singer. Karen smiled. "Then you've forgotten something important. You've forgotten that your enemies are people just like you. They have families, hopes, fears, and dreams. They're not monsters. They're just people who happen to be on the other side of a very old fight." Captain Mary Johnson took her ship, the UES Explorer, closer to the center of the formation. "Both fleets, we'd like to propose something. Our ship has meeting rooms that can accommodate both of your species safely. Would your leaders be willing to come aboard and simply talk? Not about surrender or victory, but just talk." The proposal hung in space like a challenge. Jake held his breath. Everything depended on whether two ancient enemies were brave enough to sit in the same room and remember how to have a conversation. The Corvin response came first. "The collective will consider this proposal." Then the Zephyrians. "We will also consider it." Jake felt his heart racing. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. For the first time in 300 years, both sides were thinking about something other than how to destroy each other. They were thinking about peace. Jake Harrison's voice echoed through space as his message reached both alien fleets. Every human ship in the small fleet was broadcasting the same signal on all frequencies. The words traveled through the darkness, crossing the battle zone where two ancient enemies prepared to destroy each other once again. "This is Commander Jake Harrison of the Terran Exploration Fleet," his voice said calmly. "We are humans from the planet Earth. We have watched your conflict and we ask for an immediate stop to this fighting. We want to talk." The response came fast and was not friendly. The Corvin Hive commander's voice crackled through the radio like breaking glass. The translation computers made it sound mechanical and cold. Unknown species, leave now. This fight is between ancient powers. Your small ships will be destroyed if you interfere. Go away! Jake felt his crew tense up around him. The Corvin ships were enormous. Each one could probably destroy the entire human fleet without much effort. But Jake had studied the sensor readings. Both alien fleets were running on almost empty power. The Zephyrian fleet singer spoke next. Its voice was like music, but cold music with no warmth in it. Young species, you know nothing of our eternal struggle. Leave before you become another casualty of forces you cannot understand. Lieutenant Colonel Steve Parker stepped closer to Jake. Sir, they're both right about one thing. We're outgunned by about 1,000 to 1. Even tired, those fleets could wipe us out. Jake nodded. He knew the odds. Every person on every human ship knew they could die in the next few minutes. But Jake had an idea, and it was based on something he had learned from studying Earth's history. Amy, he called to his science officer, what's the real condition of those fleets? Amy's fingers danced over her controls. Numbers and charts filled her screen. Both fleets are in bad shape, sir. Most ships are running on backup power. Their weapons are working but barely. Their shields are weak. They're fighting on willpower more than actual strength. And their crews? Tired, sir. Our medical scanners show high stress levels on both sides. These people have been fighting their entire lives. So did their parents, and their grandparents, and their great-grandparents. Jake turned to Captain Lisa Murphy. Lisa, I need a tactical analysis, not of their weapons, but of their psychology. Lisa looked confused for a moment, then understood. She had studied alien behavior at the Space Academy. Sir, both races are locked in a pattern. They fight because they've always fought. They probably don't even remember the original reason anymore. It's become their entire culture. Exactly, Jake said. They're not fighting to win anymore. They're fighting because they don't know how to stop. Danny Cooper looked up from his communications station. Sir, both fleets are moving into attack formation. The big battle is about to start. Jake could see it on the main screen. Hundreds of alien ships were lining up across from each other. The Corvin vessels looked like floating crystal cities, their surfaces covered in weapon ports that glowed with blue energy. The Zephyrian ships were harder to see because they kept phasing in and out of reality, but when they appeared, they blazed with white light. Sir, Steve said quietly, we need to decide now. Do we run, or do we try your plan? Jake looked at his crew. They were young humans, most of them born after Earth's last war. They had grown up in peace, but they knew their history. They knew that Earth had once been full of wars, too, until humans learned better ways to solve problems. We try the plan, Jake said. All ships moved to position between the two fleets. The order went out to all 12 human ships. Slowly, the small Earth vessels began to move forward, placing themselves directly in the middle of the battle zone. It should have been suicide, sir, Amy said, her voice shaking slightly. Both fleets have stopped their advance. They're staring at us. On the screen, Jake could see that she was right. The massive alien warships had stopped moving. For the first time in probably years, both sides had paused their attack to look at something else. They think we're crazy, Lisa observed. Good, Jake said. Open channels to both fleets again. This time, make sure every ship in both armadas can hear us. Danny nodded. All frequencies open, sir. Jake stepped forward. His next words would either save lives or get everyone killed. Corvin and Zephyrian fleets, this is Commander Harrison. We know you think we're small and stupid for getting between you. Maybe you're right, but we're not here to fight either of you. We're here because we've seen this before. He paused, letting that sink in. On our world, we used to fight wars just like this one. Wars that went on so long, people forgot why they started. Wars where each side hated the other so much that peace seemed impossible. We fought wars that lasted decades, where millions died, where entire nations were destroyed. Steve was looking at him with respect. The old soldier knew exactly what Jake was talking about. But we learned something, Jake continued. We learned that every war has to end sometime. We learned that enemies can become friends. We learned that there's always another way to solve problems if you're brave enough to try it. The alien fleets remained silent. Jake hoped they were listening. We're going to show you something, he said. We're going to show you the history of Earth. We're going to show you how enemies became allies, how wars became peace, how hatred became cooperation. Jake turned to his crew. All ships, begin broadcast of the Peace Archives. Dr. Karen Bell, who had been quietly working at her station, looked up with a smile. She was the fleet's expert on alien psychology, and this had been her idea. Broadcasting now, sir. Full historical archive, all formats. The human ships began transmitting everything they had about peace on Earth. Pictures, videos, documents, music, art, and stories. The tale of how Europe went from constant warfare to peaceful cooperation. How America's Civil War ended with the country coming back together. How enemies in 2 world wars became allies afterward. Most importantly, they broadcast the simple truth that Jake wanted both alien races to understand. Fighting forever was a choice, and it was a choice that could be changed. On the screen, Jake watched as both alien fleets hung motionless in space, receiving humanity's gift of hope. The space around the dead planet glowed red with laser fire. Massive ships moved like angry giants through the darkness, shooting at each other with weapons that could destroy cities. This was the Corvin-Zephyrian War, and it had been going on for 300 years. Commander Jake Harrison stood on the bridge of his ship, the UES Defiant. He watched the battle through the big screen in front of him. His hands gripped the metal rail as explosions lit up the black space like deadly fireworks. He had never seen anything like this before. How long have they been fighting? Jake asked his science officer, Lieutenant Amy Foster. She was a young woman with short brown hair who always gave him straight answers. Amy looked at her computer screens. The numbers made her face go pale. 3 centuries, sir. Maybe longer. Our computers can't find any record of when it started. Jake shook his head. 300 years of war. On Earth, that would be like fighting since before America was even a country. He tried to imagine it, but couldn't. No war on Earth had ever lasted that long. The human ships hung back at the edge of the battle zone. They were small compared to the alien vessels. The UES Defiant was the biggest ship in their fleet, but it looked like a toy next to the alien warships. Jake counted 12 human ships total. That was their entire exploration fleet. "Tell me about these aliens," Jake said to his first officer, Lieutenant Colonel Steve Parker. Steve was an older man with gray hair who had fought in Earth's last big war 20 years ago. Steve pulled up pictures on the main screen. The crystal-looking ones are called Corvins. They're like living rocks that can think together as one big mind. Very smart, very organized. They build their ships to last forever. The screen showed a Corvin warrior. It looked like a person made of blue crystal, with sharp edges and glowing eyes. Jake thought it looked beautiful and scary at the same time. The other ones are Zephyrians, Steve continued. They're made of pure energy. They can walk through walls and move faster than light without ships, but they still use ships for big battles like this. The Zephyrian image showed something that looked like a person made of bright white light. It had no solid form, just energy that moved like a ghost. Jake wondered how you could fight something you couldn't even touch. "Why are they fighting?" Jake asked. Amy checked her files again. "We don't know, sir. The records are too old. Some say it started over a nebula they both wanted. Others say it was about trading rights. Nobody remembers anymore." Jake looked back at the battle. A Corvan ship the size of a city was shooting blue beams at 3 smaller Zephyrian vessels. The Zephyrian ships seemed to disappear and reappear, like they were jumping in and out of reality. Every few seconds, one of their white energy weapons would hit the Corvan ship, making its crystal hull crack and glow. "Sir," called out Captain Lisa Murphy from the weapons station, "both fleets are damaged. I'm reading power levels at 30% on most ships. They're running on empty." Jake nodded. That made sense. After 300 years of fighting, both sides would be tired. Their ships would be old and broken. Their people would be exhausted. But they kept fighting anyway. "Why don't they just stop?" asked Lieutenant Danny Cooper from his communications post. He was the youngest officer on the bridge, barely 25 years old. "If they're both so weak, why keep going?" Steve answered with a sad smile. "Pride, son. When you've been fighting for 300 years, it's hard to remember how to stop. Both sides have lost too much to quit now." Jake understood. Earth had wars like that too, though none lasted nearly as long. Sometimes people fought so long they forgot why they started. The fighting became the only thing they knew how to do. "Sir," Amy said, "we're getting scanned by both fleets. They know we're here." Jake felt his stomach tighten. The human fleet was not built for war. They were exploration ships, meant to find new worlds and study alien life. They had some weapons, but nothing like what he saw fighting in front of him. "Are they talking to us?" Jake asked. Danny shook his head. "No, sir. They're ignoring us. I think they're too busy trying to kill each other." Jake watched as a massive explosion destroyed a Zephyrian ship. The light was so bright it hurt to look at. He wondered how many aliens had just died. Hundreds? Thousands? For what? "Sir," Lisa said, "I'm detecting a big energy buildup. Both fleets are preparing for a major attack. This could be the biggest battle we've seen yet." Jake made a decision. He turned to his crew, all young humans who had volunteered to explore the galaxy. They looked at him with trust in their eyes. They believed he would keep them safe and do the right thing. "Open a channel to the entire human fleet," Jake ordered. Danny's fingers moved over his controls. "All ships are listening, sir." Jake took a deep breath. What he was about to do was either very brave or very stupid, maybe both. "This is Commander Harrison to all human vessels. We came out here to explore and learn. Instead, we found a war that's been going on longer than our country has existed. 2 great civilizations are destroying themselves, and for what? Nobody even remembers." He paused, looking at his crew. They were listening carefully. "We're going to do something about it," Jake continued. "Prepare for Operation Peacekeeper. We're going to show these aliens what humans do best." Steve raised an eyebrow. "What's that, sir?" Jake smiled, but his eyes were serious. "We're going to teach them how to stop fighting.